In 1860, a teenage boy could earn $100 a month riding a horse half to death across the American frontier at a time when a grown man was lucky to make $1 a day. That job lasted barely 18 months before a single copper wire made it worthless overnight. This is the strange truth about the work that built America. Some of these jobs were boring, some were deadly, and a few of them, buried at the very top of this list, paid fortunes that would make a modern paycheck blush, right up until the machine, the wire, or the law erased them forever. We are counting down 20 jobs that no longer exist, and the ones that paid a fortune. Before we start, hit that subscribe button, because number 1 will change how you look at a quiet graveyard. Let's begin the countdown with number 20. Number 20. The pin setter, or pin boy, crouched in the shadows at the end of every bowling lane in America, long before a machine ever did the job. When the ball came thundering down the wood, the boy leapt into the pit, swept away the fallen pins, and reset the rack by hand, fast enough to keep the next frame moving. It was hot, dangerous, late-night work, and it belonged almost entirely to teenagers and young men who needed the money. Pay came per game, just a few pennies a line, with a nickel tip if the bowlers were feeling generous, so a quick boy working a busy Friday could pocket real cash by midnight. Alley owners loved the cheap labor, and bowlers rarely thought about the kids ducking flying pins in the dark. Then, in the 1940s, the automatic pin setter arrived, and within a decade the pits fell silent. The machine never asked for a tip, never went home tired, and never got hit. The pin boy vanished into memory, the first quiet casualty of the automation age. Number 19. The elevator operator was the polished face of every grand hotel, department store, and office tower in the country. Dressed in a sharp uniform and white gloves, the operator worked a brass lever to ease the car level with each floor, slid the gate open, and announced the departments in a practiced voice. It took genuine skill. Stopping a heavy car smoothly so no one stumbled was an art, not a button press. By the 1920s, hundreds of thousands of Americans rode elevators run entirely by hand, and the operators knew the regulars by name, the gossip of every floor, the rhythm of the whole building. In 1945, when New York's operators went on strike, the city nearly ground to a halt because no one else knew how to run the cars. But the push-button automatic elevator was already coming, sold as safe enough for anyone. By the 1960s, the lever and the gloves were gone, and the friendly voice calling out the floors fell silent for good. Number 18. The switchboard operator connected a nation that could not yet connect itself. Seated before a towering board studded with hundreds of holes, she listened for the click of a caller, asked number please, and plugged a brass cord into the right socket to complete the circuit. The work was almost entirely done by women, prized for patience and steady nerves, and at its peak, the telephone companies employed hundreds of thousands of them across America. The job demanded lightning memory and unflinching calm. Operators guided callers through fires, floods, and emergencies, sometimes the only voice between a family and help. The pay was modest, but the position carried real respectability for a young woman in the early 1900s. Then automatic dialing arrived, letting callers reach each other with no human in the middle. Exchange by exchange, through the mid-century, the great boards were unplugged. The voice that once said number please to half the country disappeared into a dial tone. Number 17. The lamplighter walked the dusk like a quiet ritual, carrying a long pole tipped with a flame to light the gas street lamps one by one as evening fell. At dawn, he walked the route again to snuff them out. In the cities of the 1800s, before electricity reached the curb, this man was the reason streets were safe to walk after dark, and children learned to tell the hour by the glow spreading down the avenue. He knew every lamp, every flickering wick, every alley that needed light first. The pay was steady and the work honest, tied to the turning of the seasons as the dark came earlier. each autumn night. But Edison's electric streetlight changed everything. Once a switch could flood a whole district with light at once, the man with the pole had nothing left to do. City by city, the gas lamps went cold, and the lamplighter's slow, glowing walk through the evening faded into a story grandparents told. Number 16. The soda jerk ruled the drugstore fountain with showmanship and a snap of the wrist. The name came from the way he jerked the long handle to draw fizzing soda water into the glass, then built sundaes, malts, and egg creams with theatrical flourish for a crowd of teenagers perched on chrome stools. From the 1900s through the 1950s, the fountain was the social heart of American small-town life, and a good soda jerk was a local celebrity, slinging slang and free refills to the kids who lingered all afternoon. The pay was low, but the tips and the status made up for it, and the job was a rite of passage for a generation of young men. Then bottled soda, supermarket six-packs, and the rise of fast food chains pulled the crowd away from the counter. One by one, the marble fountains were ripped out and the stools went cold. The jerk's snappy patter and towering sundaes survive now only in old photographs and the warm haze of nostalgia. Number 15. The milkman arrived before the sun, the clink of glass bottles on the porch as familiar as the morning paper. Driving a slow electric float or a horse cart in the early years, he delivered fresh milk in returnable bottles, collected the empties, and knew exactly how many quarts each family needed without ever being told. In 1963, nearly a third of American milk still came straight to the doorstep this way, and the milkman was a fixture of the neighborhood, trusted enough to step onto every porch in town before dawn. Children left notes in empty bottles. Mothers paid by the week. The cream rose to the top in the cold glass. But the home refrigerator changed the math, letting families store a week's worth at once, and the supermarket sold it cheaper by the gallon. Doorstep delivery dwindled through the 1970s until it nearly vanished. The clink of bottles at sunrise, once the sound of the whole street waking up, faded into silence. Number 14. The Iceman delivered the cold itself in the decades before electricity could make it. His ice was harvested in deep winter by crews who sawed huge blocks from frozen lakes and rivers, hauled them out with horses and tongs, and packed them in sawdust inside windowless ice houses to last clear through summer. Ice harvesting was brutal, dangerous work. Men fell through thin ice and lost fingers to the saws, but a hard freeze meant a short, fierce season of strong pay for those willing to risk it. Then the Iceman drove the blocks into town, swung a 50-pound chunk onto his leather-padded shoulder, and carried it up to the family icebox, while children chased the wagon for chips to suck in the heat. By the 1930s, the electric refrigerator was humming in American kitchens, making and keeping cold with no block, no wagon, no man at all. The ice houses emptied, the lake crews disbanded, and the Iceman's shoulder-borne cargo melted out of American life. Number 13. The Gandy dancer laid and leveled the rails that stitched the country together, and he did it to a song. Working in gangs along the track, these laborers used long iron bars to shove the heavy steel rails a fraction of an inch into perfect alignment, all of them heaving on the same beat called out by a leadman's rhythmic chant. The songs were not for show. They synchronized dozens of men so the rails moved as one, and that coordination was the whole skill of the job. Through the late 1800s and well into the 1900s, Gandy dancers built and maintained the vast American railroad, sweating under the sun in the south and freezing in the northern plains for wages that were hard-earned and lean. Their work chants became a quiet root of American folk music. But mechanized tampers and rail-laying machines eventually did the leveling faster and without a crew. The gangs were paid off, and the songs that once rang down the tracks fell quiet. Number 12. The lector sat above the cigar rollers and fed their minds while their hands worked. In the great cigar factories of Tampa's Ybor City, where thousands of workers rolled tobacco in long, silent rows, the lector perched on a raised platform and read aloud all day, newspapers in the morning, novels and political essays in the afternoon, his trained voice carrying over the whole floor. He was no charity case. The workers themselves paid his wages, each chipping in a small share of their pay every week, which meant a popular lector earned a respectable living and held real influence over what an entire workforce thought and discussed. He turned a tedious job into an education, and rolling tables debated literature and labor politics because of him. But factory owners grew wary of his power, and as radio spread and a bitter strike came in the early 1930s, the platforms were torn down. The voice that had read whole novels to working hands was silenced, replaced by the crackle of a radio. No one had to pay. Number 11. The linotype operator was the unseen craftsman behind every newspaper, book, and magazine for nearly a century. Seated at a clattering, towering machine invented in 1886, he typed on a strange keyboard that cast molten lead into solid lines of type, one shimmering slug at a time, ready to be locked into the printing press. The work demanded a rare blend of speed, precision, and nerve, working inches from a pot of molten metal, and it was protected by one of the strongest trade unions in America. A skilled linotype man earned a solid middle-class wage and could find work in any city in the country because no newspaper could publish without him. The hot metal room was loud, hot, and proud. Then photographic and computer typesetting arrived, and in 1978 even the New York Times set its last line of hot lead. Within a few years, the great machines were scrapped, and a century-old craft, the backbone of the printed word, was gone almost overnight. Number 10. The movie theater organist made the magic happen in the age of silent film. Before sound came with the picture, a live musician sat at a mighty pipe organ beneath the screen and improvised an entire score in real time, swelling for the chase, trembling for the villain, sighing for the lovers, often adding thunder, train whistles, and gunshots on a console built to mimic a whole orchestra. In the lavish movie palaces of the 1920s, a star organist was a genuine draw, and the best of them earned excellent money, courted by competing theaters and billed alongside the films themselves. Their playing was the emotional heartbeat of the cinema, and audiences came as much for the music as the picture. Then, in 1927, the talking picture arrived, carrying its own recorded sound, and the need for live accompaniment evaporated almost at once. Within a few short years, thousands of theater musicians were out of work, and the great pipe organ sat dark beneath screens that now spoke for themselves. Number 9. The human computer did the math that machines would later inherit, and for generations that job was a job, not a device. Long before electronics, computer meant a person, usually a highly educated woman, who performed enormous, painstaking calculations entirely by hand. At Harvard, teams of women charted the stars from glass, photographic plates. During the war and the space race, rooms full of human computers worked out ballistics tables and the trajectories that would carry rockets into orbit. Their pencils and slide rules trusted with numbers that lives depended on. The work was demanding and prestigious for its day, yet these brilliant women were often paid far less than the men who relied on their results. Their precision launched astronauts. Then the electronic computer arrived and did in seconds what had taken a room of people weeks. The title was handed to the machine, and the women who had carried it, who had calculated America into space, slowly faded from the story. Number 8. The lighthouse keeper held a lonely, sacred trust on the edge of the sea. Living in isolation on a rocky point or a wave-battered tower, the keeper kept the great lamp burning every single night, trimming the wick, polishing the lens, and hauling fuel up endless stairs so that no ship would founder in the dark. He kept a meticulous logbook and stood ready to launch a rescue when a vessel struck the rocks in a storm. The pay was steady and came with a house and a powerful sense of duty, but the cost was solitude, sometimes for months on end, with only family and the endless horizon for company. Generations of keepers saved countless lives the world would never count. Then automation came. Electric lights, automatic timers, and remote monitoring meant the lamp could burn untended. One by one, the U.S. Coast Guard pulled the keepers off the rocks. The light still turns over the water, but the patient figure who once tended it through every long night is gone. Number 7, the log driver, called a river hog or river pig, rode the spring floods on a moving carpet of timber. And few jobs in America were more dangerous. When the snow melted and the rivers ran high, logging crews dumped a winter's worth of cut timber into the water, and these men herded it downstream to the mills, leaping from log to log in spiked boots, breaking up jams with a long hooked pole, balancing on rolling timber over freezing, churning current. One slip meant being crushed or pulled under, and the worst log jams could pile up for miles and had to be broken by men crawling out onto them with the whole weight of the river behind. Because the danger was so extreme and the skill so rare, river drivers earned premium wages for a few wild weeks each spring. But railroads and logging trucks made the river drives unnecessary, and the practice was eventually outlawed. The acrobat of the log drive simply stepped off the timber and was gone. Number 6. The whaler's harpooner gambled his life on a single throw, and a great voyage could make him rich. Sailing out of New Bedford and Nantucket in the 1800s, when whale oil lit the lamps of the world, the harpooner, or boat steerer, sat at the bow of a small open boat rowed within feet of a 60-ton animal and drove the iron home by hand. Whalers were not paid wages, but a lay, a share of the entire voyage's profit, and a skilled harpooner commanded one of the largest shares aboard. A lucky 3-year voyage could send a man home with a small fortune, the equivalent of years of ordinary pay in one lump. A failed one could leave him with almost nothing after years at sea. It was a fortune wagered against drowning, disease, and the open ocean. Then petroleum was struck in 1859. Kerosene replaced whale oil in the lamps, and the whaling fleets rotted at their docks. The harpooner's deadly lucrative gamble vanished with the trade that paid it. Number 5. The radium dial painter earned a remarkable wage for delicate work, and it cost many of them their lives. In the 1910s and the 1920s, factories hired young women to hand paint the numbers on the watch faces and instrument dials with a glowing radium paint, so the figures would shine in the dark. The work was prized, and the pay was high, far above what most women could earn in a factory, because it demanded fine brushwork and steady hands. And the girls would point their brushes between their lips to get a sharp tip, swallowing tiny amounts of radium with every dial. No one told them it was deadly. Years later, the harm became tragically clear, and the women who came forward forced landmark changes that reshaped American worker safety law and won protections that still guard workers today. The glowing dials were eventually made with safer methods, and the job disappeared. What lingers is the courage of those workers whose suffering bought safeguards the rest of us inherited without ever knowing their names. Number 4. The leech collector waded into the cold for one of medicine's strangest trades. Through the 1800s, doctors believed in bleeding patients to cure almost any ailment, and that meant a relentless demand for live medicinal leeches by the millions. The collectors, often poor women, waded thigh-deep into ponds and marshes and used their own bare legs as bait, standing still while the leeches attached, then prying the swollen creatures off to sell to apothecaries and physicians. It was cold, grim, and bloody work, but when demand peaked, the price of leeches soared, and a steady supplier could earn far more than a field laborer for filling a single bucket. Whole regions were stripped nearly bare of leeches to feed the medical market. Then, medicine moved on. As doctors abandoned routine bloodletting, the bottom fell out of the trade, and the demand that had made a marsh worth wading into simply evaporated. The collector packed away her pail, and one of history's most peculiar paydays disappeared. Number 3. The Pony Express rider was paid a small fortune to gamble his life across the frontier, and his job lasted barely a year and a half. In 1860, when news still crawled across the country by stagecoach, the Pony Express promised to carry mail from Missouri to California in 10 days, using a relay of fearless young horsemen riding flat out between stations. They wanted riders light, lean, and willing to face desert, blizzard, bandits, and exhaustion, and they paid accordingly, around $100 a month or more. An astonishing sum when an ordinary laborer earned about $1 a day. A rider would gallop a horse to its limit, leap onto a fresh mount in seconds, and ride on through the night, covering distances that defied belief. The job was legend almost the moment it began. Then in October 1861, the transcontinental telegraph connected the coasts, and a message that took a galloping rider 10 days now crossed in seconds. The Pony Express folded within days. The best-paid ride in the West was over. Number 2. The resurrectionist did his work in the dark, and a single night could pay him more than a laborer earned in months. In the 1800s, American medical schools desperately needed cadavers to train their students, but the law supplied almost none. So a black market rose to meet the demand. These men, the body snatchers, crept into fresh graves by night, lifted the newly buried, and sold them to anatomy professors who asked no questions. The pay was extraordinary. A single fresh body could fetch the equivalent of weeks or even months of honest wages, and a busy snatcher worked his way through the cemeteries of the growing cities. The trade was so common that grieving families hired guards, built iron cages over graves, and watched the cemetery through the first vulnerable weeks. Public fury sometimes boiled over into riots. Then states began passing laws that gave medical schools a legal supply of bodies, and the grim profit collapsed. With nothing left to steal and sell, the resurrectionist abandoned his shovel, and the most lucrative crime of the graveyard quietly came to an end. That's our countdown, from the pin boy ducking in the shadows to the body snatcher counting his money in the dark. Some of these jobs were swept away by a machine, some by a wire, some by a single new law. But every one of them was once as ordinary as the work we do today. So here's my question for you. Which of these would you have taken, knowing what we know now, the steady glow of the lamplighter, or the fortune and the danger of the harpooner and the Pony Express? Tell me in the comments, and tell me which lost job surprised you most, because every one of these vanished the same way ours someday might.